to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch by Glider.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Folks, since this case has unfolded on Saturday night, and of course we're talking about the kidnapping of Charlotte Sena, there's been real lows and there's been real highs to this case. And of course, the high was yesterday when she was recovered alive and an arrest was made. But what we're going to do tonight is we're going to go through the investigation. And at every step, what were the state police thinking about? Because they were the first responders to this case. And I'd like everyone to think about when the police responding to this scene, a park, a camping park, what is on their mind when they're greeted by a mother? The response to the scene is just so important. And we don't know who was the first responder. Was he a police officer? And seeing the gravity of this case, did he immediately call for his boss, a sergeant, a lieutenant, or a captain? Then when they realized that this is the real McCoy, this is the real deal, this is a 9-year-old missing, special category missing person case, potentially kidnapped. Now we got to call the cavalry. We got to bring everyone in because this is really happening. So they respond to the scene. They call for resources. What does that mean? Well, now they need not 10 officers, not 20. They need a couple of hundred. So we got to mobilize and get hundreds of officers to that scene to do the search. And with those officers, we also need resources. What does that mean? We need drones. We need helicopters. As I said, this is the real McCoy. This is not a fake incident. This is really, really happening. So they got to get officers to the scene. They not only just need uniform officers, they need investigators, because who is going to interview the mother and the father and the family there? You want a trained investigator to do that. Time, place of occurrence, when, where, who, what, how, and why. All those questions must be answered. So a trained investigator must ask those questions at the scene. The scene is so important. What's on the scene forensically that can help us here? Well, there's a bicycle left at that scene that the 9-year-old girl was riding upon. Is that an important potential piece of evidence? You bet. It says so much in itself, lying there by itself without the little girl. Did the little girl fall down and hurt herself and run off? What happened here? Where's her helmet? That is suspect also, because if she took off into the woods or she fell, maybe her helmet would have came off, but she's gone and so is her helmet. She's gone with the helmet. So the responding officers conduct interviews. Now they determine this appears to be a kidnapping, an abduction. The worst nightmare for any parents on this earth, that your child could be abducted. And let's look at the situation. Here's a map of the location. This little girl was doing laps in a predetermined bicycle path with other children. And she decided at 6:15, I'm going to take another lap. And the lap was 4 to 5 minutes. So she's missing. They expected her back in 4 to 5 minutes when she doesn't show up. What does the mom do? The mom gets right out there and goes and looks for her daughter and finds the bicycle laying there without her daughter. Now, what does she do like any loving parent would do? She immediately calls the police. The police respond to the scene and they determine, based on many factors, this is really happening. This is the real deal. This is no false missing person. This is no child that just ran off. This appears to be an abduction. So now they get all the cavalry there. They get dogs, they get bloodhounds, they get shepherds to search the woods, that whole area. Now the investigative ball is rolling also. We have to interview, we have to canvass the entire park. Again, let's bring on more investigators. In fact, notify the FBI. Get the FBI here. We need some investigators. We need their resources. We have to interview every single person in that park. Some of the resources that the park has help us in our investigation. One of the things that helps them in their investigation is everyone that enters that park has to be, if they pay for a ticket to get in, they have to give their information, their name, their address, the plate number of their car. Tremendous investigative resource. Get an investigator down. Let's find out how many people, how many cars were in this park. I want every single one of them interviewed. I want to run every single one of those people against the sex offender database. All right? Because this is dangerous. This is a 9-year-old girl that was just kidnapped. This is moving fast, right? And would you know that this police are doing this simultaneously, doing all these resources and doing all these things simultaneously? You bet that's what they're doing, because there's no time to play around. This is time to get moving. This is time to try to find this little girl. So the police canvass of the park. Oh, I almost forgot. Obtain a picture of Charlotte. Yes, this is the picture that first went out. Obtain it. Well, why do we need that? Well, because we want to know who we're searching for. And guess who else we're bringing on board? Who's going to be an ally of the police during this whole thing? The press. We want the press here immediately. Let's get her photograph. Let's make copies. Let's get the press her photo. We want her photo out. We want it out into the community immediately. We don't want to waste any time. All right. We don't want to screw around. Let's get this picture out there. All right. Now, as investigators, we have to interview the parents in depth. Do you know what the first procedure is on NYPD in finding a missing person or in searching? One of the first things in the steps is to search the missing person's home. Do the state police follow those same guidelines as we do on the NYPD? And I'll get back to their home later on, because it becomes very important in this investigation. And if it was procedural that they had a car watching that home, it was brilliant. So now they search. They keep searching. Simultaneously, they're conducting this investigation, because the search and the investigation is in constant flux, because you're interviewing people. What were the results of those interviews? Do we have anyone going around the park, canvassing the park, and getting every single one's video? Every single person in the park, we want their still photos. Any photos they took. Assign 2 investigators to do that. Let's get all that. We got to get a website up with all of this stuff. Let's get all the pictures. Why is that important? Because we've learned from the past. The Boston Marathon bombers, they were identified through pictures and video taken on people's cell phones. Could the perpetrator who snatched this little girl, Charlotte Sena, could he be caught on video? Could he be caught on pictures? Could someone have said, I saw this creepy guy around the park checking out the little kids? Could someone have seen that? Absolutely. Do we know if they did see that? Do we know if the state police have any photographs like that? We don't know. But these are all the things you must consider as a police officer and as an investigator, because you know why? Because the stakes are so high. There's a 9-year-old girl missing. And, you know, when 48 hours went by and she was not saved, she was not recovered, I thought the worst. I've covered these, I've worked these, and I've seen too many of these cases end tragically. So you have to do everything right, everything correctly. And you know something? The state police did, the FBI did. Look what they issued an Amber Alert. 9-year-old Charlotte Sena is missing from Moreau State Park. Get a picture out. Get a picture out to the media. Let's get it out on television. Let's have every single person in this state, every single person in this country know what she looks like. Because that is what generates leads. That's what generates tips. TIPS. If you see something, say something. Who knows what information the police got, what the state police got from tips? Who knows? I'm going to go over some more. We're going to keep going because I think you guys need to know the steps taken in these cases, the investigative resources that are voluminous, the know-how of the investigators. And sometimes a suggestion can be made by an experienced police officer or a detective that maybe a boss or maybe someone didn't think of. And that could be the catalyst to solving a case like this. You could see, even by the way I'm speaking, how connected I am to this case and how worried I was as someone covering this in a podcast that the worst was going to happen. And due to a lot of you guys, the prayers and everyone keeping this little girl on the front burner, I give a lot of credit to you guys because that's why she was saved. That's why we recovered her watch. That's why there was a positive conclusion to this. Anyway, guys, that was one of my longest monologues ever. I'm going to bring on my co-host tonight. You guys all love him. He's loved, respected, revered. I don't want to get too crazy here. But we have Professor, retired NYPD Sergeant, Professor, Lawyer, Mike Geary. Welcome to the show tonight, Mike.
Billy, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me on tonight. Good evening, everybody.
It's great to have you on. And I think that it's important because there's many of these channels that, and I'm not putting down anyone on YouTube, but we happen to be the real deal. I mean, we've done this stuff and we know what should be done. And we know when something isn't done, we can be critical of it. However, when things are done correctly, and, look, I'm sure in this investigation, there were some mistakes made, but you know something? 48 hours, she was recovered. They made an arrest.
That's right.
They have done it any faster. And we'll explain along the way why they did certain things at the time they did certain things and the pitfalls of doing it another way, because sometimes the press doesn't understand it. But again, I'm going to praise the press this time because they were an integral partner of this investigation and so important. Mike?
Yeah, Billy, whenever you have a abducted child, we know from statistics, FBI statistics, local, just our own experience, that 48 hours, between 24 and 48 hours, unfortunately, that's about as far as it goes for some of these children because they're often abused and kidnapped and killed. And so it is like absolutely the expression time is of the essence. You better believe it. So after the first 24 hours, I was getting a little worried because I've experienced that myself with child abduction cases. And you can do everything right by the book, and you can commence that investigation, coordinate it with other agencies in the city, like in New York City, and you can still end up, it's too late, and the child is gone. So it is thankfully everything worked out, but people don't realize how much coordination. Doesn't matter. State police have tremendous resources. They need coordination with the local police. They need coordination with the FBI. And it all takes a little bit of time for everybody to get on board, everybody get a command center set up and move. But police train for this sort of stuff. How fast can we do this? How fast can we get going? Because it's critical. The very first few hours, it's got to be done. It's got to be done right. Thank goodness, Ms. Sena, the mother, did not hesitate. The father did not hesitate. They called pretty much practically immediately, and that may be what also helped get this girl home alive. And we're just very thankful for that. But time is absolutely of the essence. The coordination, the experience, getting it done, and and I've been on the receiving end where it gets all done right and you don't have a happy ending. So thank God this one was a happy ending.
Mike, I've written down in preparation for this show because I don't want to count on, listening to the press. I want to count on what I see, but there's still been a lot of secrecy to this case. And
Yes.
we could praise perhaps the state police for this because, again, there's a 9-year-old girl involved here. And she was with this mutt for 48 hours. This savage that I like to call him. It's so good not to be on the police department anymore where I couldn't use words like that anymore. I would be censored. Now I can use perpetrator, savage,
Right.
all the nice words that you're not allowed to use when you're in the police department. So I sat down and I wrote about 50 investigative steps, 50 investigative steps. And there's more, of course, because when you investigate and when you ask questions, you get answers. And when you get answers, it develops more questions. And that's what an investigation is. And I'll get in later. I always talk about the art and the science of investigation, and both the art and the science in this case were present from minute one. And again, I can't praise the police enough, but I'm not here just to praise them. I'm to go over some things so some of you folks that are listening can learn about this and learn why, the old police department, I don't know why they used to use that acronym NIATWE. It made no sense because it was the last letter of where, when, who, what, how, and why. NIATWE.
Right.
And it was an acronym. I was like, who invented that? But every investigation should answer those questions: when, where, who, what, how, and why. And that's what you have to realize you're doing when you conduct an investigation. So one of the things that I found out early on in this investigation, I thought it was a brilliant thing that in the park, they take everyone's identity, their license plate number down, they're paying to enter the park, and their pedigree information. Years ago in New York City, they were having, of course, so many shootings inside clubs that you wouldn't get into a club unless they scanned your license. And that became a practice of clubs throughout the city. And what that did, in case there was an incident inside the club, they had the identity of every single person that was in there. Brilliant, right? And I thought of the same thing when I heard that this park, as a security measure, they take your information, they take your plate number down of your car. So now, what does that mean to an investigator, Mike? I'm going to quiz you. What does that mean, Mike?
Billy, it's information because it gives you a corpus of information immediately, so you know who is surrounding in that area, who are the campers, maybe how many are there, what their car looks like. You've got pictures, when they're coming and going. So it gives you tremendous information as to, on a timeline, going from A to B, from certain hours in a continuum. Who is at that park at what time? It just gives you a tremendous amount of information. If you notice one of those people leaving, like tearing out of there, that looks like consciousness of guilt.
Wow, you used the Gearyism.
Thank you,
Mike. Not only that, I'm thinking a little bit ahead of you as an investigator. As an investigative boss, I'm going to have two of my best investigators go and get the entire list of everyone who was in the park at that time. I'm not done. With that list, I'm going to say, I want all criminal histories of every single person, and I want you to cross-reference that with the sex offender list. So boom, we're working. We're working right from minute one. If you get any hits on the sex offender list, I want the photographs of the hit printed out. I want those pictures out, and I want you can't put them out into the public because there's no probable cause. There's nothing like that. But for law enforcement use only. Keep canvassing that park. What were the results of interviews? Remember I said before, you ask questions, you get answers. What derives from questions? Answers. What derives from answers? More questions. Because you know something? We're going to find this girl. We're going to find this girl because we have to. She's 9 years old. We're going to find this girl. There's something that Governor Hochul kept talking about yesterday. And it's almost like in our technological world, we take for granted so many things. And one of the things now, at least in the real crime community, everyone follows this and something called geofencing.
Right.
And I know you learned about this too, Mike.
From you.
And again, I'm not an electronic genius. However, geofencing gives law enforcement the ability to pull up all the cell phones and all the laptops, all the electronic devices used in a specific geographic area. Now, wow, that's some powerful evidence, right?
Exactly.
With that, we're going to identify the owners. Same thing. We're going to run criminal histories from the cell phones of the names that we get, cross-reference them, reference those numbers with the vehicle IDs, the plate numbers, and the IDs that we got from security at the front gate. And again, cross-reference with the sex offender database. Another investigative resource, I want the entire sex offender database in a 20-mile vicinity of this park. I want that. I want all the names, and I want their pictures printed out. And again, for law enforcement only, because I want to see, was there potentiality that one of these sex offenders on the registry was in this park at that very specific time. So you can see it's already voluminous and all the things that we are doing. Again, some of them may not result in pay dirt. Some of them are checklist things. And you know something? Sometimes the process is so important. And what does that mean? You tell me, Mike, you're the professor. What's the process?
Billy, it's the procedures that you follow that are written up and that have been gone through over the years. You know, you go from many, many years ago, especially if an adult was missing, the police wouldn't take a report for at least 24 hours and things like that. It wasn't until we got smart as a police department and we realized that when people go missing, even adults, that sometimes they can be in grave danger. And with the child, you always have to be up on your game. And so the procedures, you got to follow it. You have to follow it no matter what. If you think that it may be a misunderstanding between miscommunication between the missing child and some other parents of another child or whatever it happens to be, you have to follow those procedures because they are set, because they work well and they work well and from results. And once we get the results and we realize that these are the best protocols to follow, we follow them because we know that they will give us the best results, the quickest, and they'll be the most thorough, because you don't want to go off, half-cocked, half-assed, run around with, like a chicken. You've got to do this methodically. Some people might say you're doing it slowly, but you got to do it methodically and as fast as possible. And with all of the resources that the FBI have and the state police, especially the FBI with their technological abilities that are greater than any local police department, they can bring up a lot of this information really fast. And you can then get answers to preliminary questions. Who was in the park? Are they still there? Did anybody see them? Anybody on a hit list, like a watch list? Anybody got a warrant out for them? Anybody been in prison? Anybody on some sort of sex offender registry list? You can get that stuff and you get that information. You start downloading it in just a couple of hours. So that's absolutely important. And we know that works. This kind of protocol works.
Mike, you covered it. But the word I was sort of looking for is that in police procedure, the reason it's a procedure, the reason it's a process is because policing didn't start yesterday or last week or last year. It's been around for hundreds of years. So some of these procedures are tried and true because they've worked in the past,
That's right.
And so you need to stay with process and you need to stay with procedure, because guess why? Because it works. And then you bring in your most talented investigators, your most talented cops, the real go-get-em, ass-kicking cops that, the public doesn't want to see anymore. But when you have a case like this, that's what you want. You want your best. And that's what we're bringing out. That's what we're bringing to the table here. One of the other investigative resources I thought of, when we talk about canvassing is walking around and talking to people, interviewing people. There was information out in the neighborhood that this guy was a creep, the guy who got caught. And there had been other complaints, other people complaining about him. Had he been in the park that day? Well, he obviously was, but did anyone see this creep? What was his behavior? The only way you're going to find that out as an investigator is to go and knock on doors. And here it wasn't doors, it was tents and campers.
Mm-hmm.
Interview everyone out there. Someone saw something. I know we killed that term. If you see something, say something. But guess what? That is so important. And that's what leads to information. The tips line, people calling up, investigating every single one of those tips. Guess what? Because one of those tips could be the tip that finds this little girl, right? Relentless. You don't, I said yesterday when I went on the air, I said, you know something? I bet you in the 48 hours that the state police worked this, I bet you they didn't get an hour of sleep.
No
and
way.
I don't even think anyone wanted to go home.
No.
Because they were driven. They were driven to find this little girl. They were driven to get this perp. Because there's good and there's evil in this world. And these savages that would kidnap a kid, that's evil, And I guarantee you, these guys worked relentlessly and didn't stop. And as a result, we have that on the screen. I saw that and I thought that was so great. Instead of seeing DOA on her or deceased, we're seeing found and returned to her family, found and returned to her elementary school, found and returned to her brothers and sisters, found and returned to the community. That's what good policing does. And guess what? What do the police do after this? Well, this investigation's not over. There's still, it's still ongoing.
Oh yeah.
And we'll explain to you a little later why. But some of the other investigative resources, we talked about geofencing, and that is a technology that is tremendous. And it comes into play, and in almost every investigation these days, there's a digital component to this, meaning cell phones, meaning computers. Now, I don't want to cut ahead, but we'll get later on to the warrants. But so identifying all the cell phones in the area, that's part of the geofencing. Check list of recently released sex offenders and parolees. And were they in the park at this time? And can we identify that? And with saying that, jails and prisons are great sources of intelligence. Go to the nearest jail. Touch base with their investigators. What do you got? Anyone recently get out that's a sex offender that you're worried about that lives in this community? Because you think it's a mistake, or you think you'd be remiss to believe that the person that did this is from this area? Geographical crime prevention, right?
Right.
Doesn't it make sense that he probably lives in this area? Yeah. You think a guy's going to travel from Florida to go to this park? He doesn't know about it. And it also makes a little bit of sense, and we'll find out as the investigation develops further. There's a potentiality that this savage knew this little girl, and not, to say hello. And we're finding out he's a mailman, but we're not, or was a mailman. We don't know his status of his employment right now. So could he have actually been delivering mail in Charlotte Sena's home, to her home? And did he have his eye on her? And did she maybe recognize him? All of these are questions that can only be answered by the investigators. And that's why the follow-up of this investigation is so important. Oh, yeah. And we're going to find all of those things out. But guess what? Not yet. Because the police are not ready to tell us. And you know something? For the privacy of this little girl, maybe some things are better off left unknown to the public and to the media. Your thoughts, Mike?
Yeah, Billy, when you're thinking about timelines, because I always talk about timelines to my students whenever you're doing like a homicide investigation or any sort of crime investigation, you think about this guy, as you say, nobody's going to go from California or Florida, upstate New York, where there's all backcountry roads and stuff like that, and do this sort of action. That person's probably a fairly local person, knows their way around that area. Absolutely. We saw this with Rex Sherman in the Gilgo case because he's lived in that area his whole entire life. He knows where you could put a body. He knows what traffic patterns are like. He knows where it's darkest, where roads don't have lights on them and things like that. What I'd like to know is when these people came into this, the poor family came here into the park. How far behind was Mr. Ross? Did he come in half an hour later? Did he come in an hour later? Was he there 2 days earlier? And this was a spontaneous thing? I don't think so. My guess would be they came in. And then he may have come in just a few minutes later, a few hours later. Maybe he set up camp. Where did he set up camp? Did he set up camp in an area where he could actually spy on that girl and maybe be unobserved? That sort of thing with his camper or whatever he had. That's really important. And the idea that he's a lone wolf and this is very unpredictable. Maybe not, but I want to see that cell phone. I'm not sure if he's got a laptop or whatever in his home, but I want to see his cell phone. I want to see who he's talking to. I want to see who he's texting. I want to see if he is connected anyway, in any shape or form, to any other pedophile group or anything else. That's what I want to see. There's so much information that we can get from just think about your whole entire life. Practically, it says a lot about you. What is on your phone? What is your browsing history? Who are you talking to? What searches do you do? That sort of thing. You can tell people's hobbies, where they've been traveling. So that's a font of information, and that's going to take a while to go through. Luckily, we were successful, and I know he's lawyered up, but I would still want to do an interview with him if we could. That would be fantastic. But there's an opportunity here to see whether or not there is any other like-minded people who may be connected to this guy. You just never know. And when you talk about him being a mailman, just think about it. You see your local mailman every single day. They become part and parcel of your life. You wish them hello. You see them. You wish them a happy Merry Christmas, things like that. You get to know them. You kind of trust them. You see them in your neighborhood walking around. They become part of your community, the fabric of your community. They walk around and you see them, but you really don't see them because they can observe. We know from the BTK killer, Dennis Rader out in Kansas, Wichita, Kansas. He was a code enforcement officer. He's just a small, meek, mild-looking guy driving around every day. Everybody knows him. Everybody sees him. They may not know him personally, but he's just a person. And he's a fabric of the community. And this guy, we believe, Ross, he lives in a trailer behind his mother's house, behind his mother's trailer. But he may also, it appear, to have property, not sure what kind of property, developed or undeveloped, within like a block or two of the Sena's family's home. So that is intriguing because that opens up the possibility that maybe he'd been scoping out the Sena's family or any other family in the area. So there's a lot of work to do. Like you said, there's a tremendous amount of work to do. The public probably won't even find out about it because there'll be other, stories, overlapping the story in the future. But with him and with their investigators, they're not even beginning to scratch the surface of who this guy is and what does he do and what has he been doing.
Very good points, Mike. Outstanding, actually. We're gonna move to it, folks. This is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed to us, shame on you. Go to our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and ring that bell. And if you want to contribute to us, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels. We have a YouTube channel membership with, count them, 5 different levels. And you see the folks in the green font. They're part of our YouTube friends, family, subs, and we really appreciate everything they do. Folks, one of the most, again, we're going to get to the meat and potatoes of this case. But I always refer to these type of things as the art and science of investigation. The art of policing is just being a cop, searching for a kid, talking to people, reading into situations. In this case, having resources, having sources of information, and knowing what to do when things like this happen. That's the art of being a police officer. And then the science. And sometimes the art and the science, they converge on each other. But the science is what, in essence, was the smoking, when we say smoking gun evidence in this case. I think everyone's familiar with this case now in regards to the perpetrator going to the home of the victim's parents at 0420 in the morning, that's 4:20 a.m., and reaching into their mailbox and dropping off a note, a ransom note. And luckily, guess what happened? We talk about police procedure.
Mm-hmm.
The state police had a car watching that house. You may think, big deal. Guess what?
It's a big deal.
That they didn't think about that yesterday, the day before. That's in their procedures. Because guess what? That's happened before. Something's happened before. We're watching the home of a kidnapping victim bore fruit. And it did this time, right? So the perpetrator, the genius that he is, the rocket scientist that he is, he drops off, look at that moron. He drops off a ransom note into the mailbox. And I guess the officers weren't close enough to see the plate on his car. They determined what type of car it was. That's Craig Ross Jr., by the way. But they retrieve this ransom note, and I would imagine they handled it in a way that was forensically correct so that they didn't destroy the forensic evidence on it, because they were able to lift the fingerprint from. Isn't that amazing? Aren't you amazed at that? And folks, I said to Professor Mike, Sergeant Geary, Attorney Mike, I said to him earlier on the show, I said, you know something, Mike, I bet you they didn't dust the paper. I would bet you they used chemicals to raise up that fingerprint and then took a picture of it. And then they submitted the fingerprint into the AFIS database, the Automated Fingerprint Identification System, which I'm going to have Professor Geary now explain to you what it is.
Well, thank you very, very much, Billy. I learned a lot from you. So I'll be channeling my inner Billy Cannon. But the automatic fingerprint identification system is a system whereby everyone's fingerprints, when they're taken, say, for instance, you become a police officer, you get your fingerprints go to the local police department, through the local police department, the state, and also the FBI, so that everybody. So if I commit a burglary and I leave a fingerprint, or I'm like this guy, I leave my fingerprint on a ransom note, it's already in the system. And sometimes people don't realize that if a person has not ever been fingerprinted, you'll get the fingerprint off the piece of paper or off the object, but you won't get a hit, what they call a hit in AFIS. But automatic fingerprint identification system, it's when all the fingerprints are uploaded. Now, years ago, 40 years ago, it was on little cardboard sheets of paper, and that's how they do it, and they'd go to the FBI. Now everything is obviously you could it's digitized, so it's much faster, and it's an excellent system. And therefore, every time you say, for instance, apply for like a gun permit, or some I think maybe even driver's licenses, they may do like a thumbprint. All of those things will go up to a state system, and then if you're convicted of a crime, it'll go up to a federal system. And therefore, if you had a 19, like say, for instance, Mr. Ross, he had a DWI collar in New York back in the 1990s. Thank goodness his fingerprints were in the system. But if he had that fingerprint taken, I don't know, say Colorado in 1990, and he moved across the United States to New York, and he did the same thing that he did the other day, left his fingerprint on that piece of paper, it would have popped up in AFIS, because it's also on the federal level. So all those fingerprints would be receivable through the APIS system. So it's automatic fingerprint identification system. It doesn't work exactly like you see in that old TV show, CSI Miami and things like that. No, because, it will always be at the very end. There may be, APIS might come up with a number of possible prints that look really close, but it will be up to a veteran fingerprint detective to go over those few close matches and then make the final call about the whirls and the swirls and the lines and cracks on your finger, and make that final call. So it takes a few hours, and they did it, and they did it as fast as you possibly can do it. Because remember, this is an emergency, and there's no holds barred. Like Billy said, nobody's going home. Everybody is too keyed up, too amped up. They want to get this girl. And you bet they were working nonstop. And thankfully, APIS worked. Everything worked perfectly. And they were able to get his fingerprints and ID this guy and realize where he lived. He lives close by. He's a local guy. We can figure out where he is pretty darn quick. And we moved fast. And the faster you can move, especially with a child, because you got that like statistically 24 to 48 hour window where that child is alive. Beyond that, the hope's dim, but they did it quickly and everything worked. And that's how the APIS fingerprint identification system worked beautifully.
Absolutely. Mike, I almost feel like enrolling in your classes now. That was almost like a lecture.
Oh, I'm sorry. I learned from you.
Richella Pranzo, Craig Nelson Ross Jr. pleaded guilty to drunken driving charges in 1999, forcing him to submit fingerprint samples, which on Tuesday led to his arrest in the Charlotte Sena abduction. Richella, thank you so much.
Yes.
Someone in the chat, and I've heard this before, saying that the fingerprint was not from the note, it was from the mailbox. That's not true. The governor said it was from the note. The chief, the colonel from the state police said they retrieved it from the note. So I don't know where this got the fingerprint from the mailbox is coming from, but I've heard several sources say that the fingerprint was lifted from the note. So, again, we can all get incorrect information, but my sources are saying that they lifted it from the note. It's an interesting thing because if someone's fingerprints are not in the system and they do bad things, it's hard to get them identified. I remember we had a case in the 19th precinct when I was in homicide. This guy came into an office of a psychologist and he slaughtered the doctor, stabbed her, I don't know how many times. And he brought a duffel bag with him and he dumped it in the hallway as he fled. And Matt Steiner, a first grade detective from the crime scene unit, was able to lift a palm print off this duffel bag. And this guy had only been arrested a month earlier for jumping the turnstile, which is no longer a misdemeanor.
Right.
So if that was done today, he wouldn't be fingerprinted. But he was fingerprinted and he was identified by a palm print on this duffel bag for a murder. It was a horrific case. So folks, so this, the science of this, the fingerprint lifted off the note, and apparently the note, when we don't know what's in the note, they're not going to, obviously, they're not going to release it. They may never release it, but this rocket scientist was trying to get a ransom for kidnapping this little girl. I mean, the scary thing is you can look at this guy and look completely into his brain from his empty eyes, and the scary thing was that this poor little girl was with him for 48 hours, when we see these pictures, it just says to us victory. 9-year-old girl went missing from upstate New York Park, found in good health, police say. Good health, but something? I'm euphoric that she was saved, but I also worry about her mental health and her family's mental health, because this is beyond traumatic. It's as bad as it gets, and so getting back to those resources, now they have this note and they get a fingerprint match. Now what, guys? Now what? Now what do we do? We're going through this whole investigation. How are we going to find him? Well, what was the address that he used when he was arrested in 1999. Oh, it's an address that's 2 miles from the Sena's family home. Does that concern anybody? Yeah, because now there's a potential possibility that he was targeting this little girl because he was working. And then again, not a lot of stuff is being released. Hochul let it fly out of her mouth during the press conference that he was a mailman, but we're not getting any confirmation. So the state police are being very, very tight-lipped with this. But now, okay, how are we going to find him now? Well, where was he raised? Where did he grow up? Where does his mother live? Does he have any relatives in this community? Boom. Lo and behold, he has a mother that lives in this area. And they're able to find that address. And Mike, you want to continue with the story?
Well, I was just thinking as you're talking about the arrest record that, you know, dating back to 1999. Also, that gives you his full name, his middle name, first, last, middle name, his date of birth, and you could also, if you're worried about like maybe the timeliness of that information or the freshness of that information, you could also do a DMV check to see if he's got a driver's license, and because everybody has to, you know, you got to keep your driver's licenses up to date. And so that would maybe even a better one. So you get that, and you realize, okay, we're not sure where he lived. We know where he lived in 1999. We're not sure now. We're going to go there now. But along the way, let's double check with DMV. Let's run his name and see if we can get maybe an update, because this guy probably still lives in the area, but we don't want to spook him. Just think about it. The logistics. If you boom the door at his old address and he doesn't live there anymore, now you've frightened the people who are there, and you may have alerted this guy, and he may take her and move. So I'm thinking, as we're going to that old address, because you got to cover that, you absolutely have to cover that. Think about running that DMV check, getting a brand new, fresher address, and you at that point, as you know, Billy, you're getting the troops assembled, the SWAT team assembled, because you're going to take down a few doors, you know, and that's an exciting time, and that's what the cops are living for. You know, you work for many years, and a lot of it is, you know, order maintenance. But when you get a case like this, where there's a little baby child missing, that's where cops are at their best. Nobody's going home. Nobody's giving up. Nobody's getting tired. Nobody's complaining. Guys are just looking for things to do. What can I do? What can I do to help? And they did a fabulous job.
Absolutely. You know, I'm ashamed of myself, Mike. I didn't think of that DMV investigative resource. You beat me to it, but that was good, Mike.
All right.
And one of the things also that DMV can give you is a historic printout of the person you're running, in that where did they used to live? You run their license, and because every time you move, you have to change your address on your driver's license. And it can give us what car he was driving that day. I'm ashamed of myself, Mike. All these investigative resources, I just didn't. I can't think of everything. That's why you
so many
minds.
So many.
Right. You have to have good minds with you to remind you of some of these things. And again, when you find out that information, what did it just give us? It gave us more possibilities. The other thing I want to chastise you about is that you would never hit one location by itself. You would do it simultaneously.
Right? Okay. All right.
Okay?
All right.
So if he has 3 addresses that are known to him, we look at our watches, we get 3 different teams, and we hit them all at once. Because as you said, if we hit a location and it's bad guy's friend calls him up and says, look, the police were just here. You better get out of Dodge. Right. So that's one of the things that we would do. We would hit them simultaneously. Let me play a little bit. I know we've been talking for almost 50 minutes straight, and I think this is an amazing talk, but I want to play a little bit of this because people love to see the news talk about it too.
In upstate New York.
We're learning more about the fingerprint on a ransom note that police say helped them find her alive and make the arrest. And tonight, police are working to see if Craig Ross is linked to any other crimes. CBS 2's Tony Aiello spent the day in upstate in Saratoga County, and he joins us now live. Tony.
Maurice, a family member told me Charlotte Sena spent the day quietly with her mom and her dad. Can you imagine that family's relief to have Charlotte safely back home? It's a sense of relief widely shared in this community.
I've been praying for It's 48 hours since I got the first Amber Alert.
Carol Brown lives just down the road from the location where police found Charlotte Sena hidden in a trailer behind the suspect's mother's home. Brown knew something was up Monday night as her quiet neighborhood exploded with activity.
Then the entire road lit up right here with police officers, with a helicopter overhead, just like out of a movie.
This drama had a happy ending. Charlotte, shaken but in good physical condition. Suspect Craig N. Ross, age 46, grabbed by members of a local SWAT team. He's charged with kidnapping Charlotte from Moreau Lake State Park as she biked on Saturday. The governor says Ross set the stage for his own arrest by visiting the girl's home, putting a ransom note in the family mailbox early Monday morning.
Leaving a critical piece of evidence behind, his own fingerprint.
A check of the print led cops to the suspect within hours. Witnesses say the assembled first responders erupted with applause when Charlotte was found in good condition. As for Ross,
My family had an issue with him in the beginning of the summer.
Carol Brown says she came outside one day as her young grandson was in the yard.
And standing over him, right over him with his back to me, was that man. And my heart sank.
You confronted him, he got on his bike, and he rode away.
Yes. And I believe with all my heart after last night that probably my grandson was this close.
So the suspect gave the court a different address in Porter Corners, New York. We checked. That address in Porter Corners is literally just around the corner from where the Sena family lives. And that raises all kinds of questions about whether Charlotte was known to the suspect and whether he targeted her. That address in Porter Corners was searched today along with other locations. This is still a very active investigation. The suspect remanded to jail without bail. Live in Saratoga County, New York, Tony Aiello, CBS 2 News.
All right, Tony, thank you. A spokesperson for the Sena family released a statement saying in part, quote, "We are thrilled she is home and we understand that the outcome is not what every family gets." They also thanked everyone who helped in the search.
Amazing, just amazing. Yeah. I mean, you just, as you watch that, it just it really touches your heart to see that the conclusion of this could have been so tragic. And so let's keep going, Mike. Now, this case is not over because one of the most important things, of course, sadly, is the debriefing of the little girl.
Right.
In Manhattan, in New York City. And again, that's where I come from, and I know the way it works. We have detectives from Manhattan Special Victims, or Bronx, or Staten Island, or Queens, or Brooklyn, that are specially trained to interview children. And sadly, we have to mention this. We don't know what occurred to little Charlotte during these 48 hours. And that's important to find out. Both for her and for her parents, how they're going to get her treatment, psychological treatment, and even to say nothing happened to her of a horrific nature sexually. Still, this is so traumatic that she absolutely needs psychological counseling after this. A 9-year-old, an adult would need psychological counseling if something like this happened to you. So the debriefing of this little girl, that also will give us, as investigators, ammunition to question this mutt. This Craig Ross Jr. Because when we go to interview him and he starts blowing smoke up our butt, as we call it in the business, when he starts lying to us, we could say that's not what happened. Why are you lying? And we can confront him and get him to tell the truth. It was so heartbreaking when I heard that when they hit the location, first of all, he resisted. They probably just backhanded him to the head,
Right.
But they found the little girl in a cupboard.
In the camp.
I was just like, oh my God. That was so heartbreaking to hear that she was found in a cupboard. But something, but she's alive. That's the most important thing, So going on with this investigation, warrants, besides the interviews, which is so important. Hopefully this mutt waived Miranda and he made a full confession, full admission, because that will make the prosecutor's job much easier. It'll make the job the investigators much easier. It'll make everyone's job that much easier. Now we get to the stage of the search warrants, Mike. And how important are they?
Yeah, Billy, in the beginning, like you know and I know, this is an emergency. From the time this poor Sena girl is kidnapped, and then within 48 hours they got her. But during that 48 hours, it's called, there's what they call an exception to the search warrant rule, which means that if there is lives in danger, or life is in danger, then you can do as a police officer what you need to do. If you need to boom down a door, you need to stop somebody because they fit a description, you don't have to worry about all the little constitutional niceties because a life is in danger. So they can do an awful lot of investigating without having to worry about things like search warrants and things like that under the Fourth Amendment. But now that the child is found, you now then, if you want to go look further through that camper or his other piece of property that he has, you're going to need a warrant, because now it's not an active case. The emergency is over. Once the emergency is over, now you have to get a search warrant. You have to respect his privacy, and therefore they're going to look around, I'm sure, or in and around also the mother's trailer, his camper, and I think they'll probably will be looking at that piece of property where that's really close by the Sena's home. And if I'm an investigator, and Billy, the same thing, I want to go there. If it's undeveloped, I want to see if there's any ground that's been disturbed. Is there look back over to see if any children in the area over the years have been kidnapped and are still missing. I want to scan one of those scan machines that goes over the ground penetrating radar. I want cadaver dogs out there. I want to go over that piece of property with a fine-tooth comb, and you're going to need search warrants for that. You'll get them, but you have to get them in order to protect, any sort of investigative information you get later on for a prosecution. But there's a lot of searching to do and a lot of work to do ahead of time, and they're going to need search warrants to do it, and they'll get it, and that's the proper way to do it. But there's a lot of work to do.
See, leave it to Professor Geary to come up with the emergency exception to a search warrant, and that's good. But now the emergency's over. They have him in custody. They found the little girl. The little girl's alive. Now we have search warrants to do that. We have to go to a judge and request search warrants based on probable cause to search his home, his computer, his cell phone, any evidence of what he was thinking of doing, any evidence on his computer that he was doing certain searches that indicated he was following this girl or this family. So all of that is important. I want to play another little snippet here.
While riding her bike in upstate New York, authorities say she is in good condition, and this morning we are learning new details on how they say they tracked down the suspect and brought her home. Let's go to Stephanie Ramos, who's in upstate New York for us. Good morning, Stephanie.
Robin, good morning. As each hour went on in this search, hope faded. Agencies like the New York State Police to the FBI all assisting in this massive search for Charlotte. And when she was found, there was this collective sigh of relief. Police are now trying to figure out if Charlotte's family was deliberately targeted.
Relief and joy this morning. Missing 9-year-old Charlotte Sena found alive after a heart-pounding 48-hour search.
She'll be going home. That's the story. Charlotte will be going home.
Family and friends gathered at a vigil in upstate New York overnight, erupting in cheers the moment they got the news. Charlotte's family overcome, thanking the hundreds of rescuers who jumped into action after she disappeared at Moreau Lake State Park on Saturday while biking with friends. Police believing she was abducted. On Monday, New York State Police confirming Charlotte was found in good health and a suspect was taken into custody after leaving a ransom note at the Sena family home.
State police immediately go to the mailbox and identify what is a ransom note that had been left behind for Charlotte. 4:20 in the morning, opens the mailbox and inserts the ransom note, leaving a critical piece of evidence behind, his own fingerprint.
The suspect, identified as 47-year-old Craig Nelson Ross Jr., he's been charged with kidnapping in the first degree. New York Governor Kathy Hochul saying overnight they found him and Charlotte in a camper behind his mother's home 13 miles from the Sena's house. Charlotte found in a cabinet.
The little girl was found in a cabinet, cupboard. She was rescued.
Charlotte taken to a local hospital. Governor Hochul saying she appeared to be outwardly physically unharmed. Charlotte had last been seen at 6:15 Saturday evening at the state park where she was camping with her family, riding bikes with friends around this loop when she decided to go around it one last time by herself before sunset. When the fourth grader didn't return after 15 minutes, her parents started searching. At 6:45, her bike was found along the path, but Charlotte was gone.
You can never be too careful with your kids. You know, pay attention to where they're at, what they're doing. For her to ride her bike around that loop would take her about 4 minutes, 5 minutes. You think they're safe doing that at 9 years old, but you just got to be cognizant and be paying attention to things around you, your surroundings all the time.
Police say a fingerprint on the ransom note was matched to fingerprints from the suspect's arrest in this area in 1999 for driving while intoxicated. The governor says charges are expected in overnight. Charlotte's family releasing a statement saying they are so thankful and thrilled to have Charlotte home. They do understand this is not the outcome for everyone, but they are thankful. Guys.
And rightfully so. Thank you, Stephanie, so much. And great police work there. And you're right. It's the outcome that all families hope for.
Yeah, we're so glad she's okay.
We are.
So again, even the feel-good story for the press, which we said earlier on in this investigation, Mike, is was an integral part of this investigation.
Right.
The press really helped a great deal, and we say sometimes the press can be your greatest friend or your worst enemy.
Yeah, they could put out the information that you need to get out to the public. That photograph of the girl, people got to see it. People got to say, "Wait a minute, I saw that girl yesterday." Especially if this goes on, it's like say for a week or two, something like that. The public's got to see that. Say, "Wait a minute, that girl. Was she with that guy, or who was she with? I think I've seen her around." There's tremendous amount of valuable information to be gathered from tips. Not all of them are going to be, they'll be sincere, but not all of them are going to be accurate. But you got to go through them because that's what the press is for. They report the story and they get out that information to help the police. And they can be your best friend or they can be your worst enemy. And in this case, everybody's rooting for the return of this little girl. They got her, and it was excellent job. And they did a fantastic job, and the press was integral to get it out there. And also getting it out there helps you with volunteers. The more people, because people want to help. They want to help, but they just got to know. And you give them the opportunity, people will normally step up. Volunteer fire, off-duty police, retired or retired sheriffs, campers, hikers, people that know that area. They may say, look, I've been through that area 100 times on hikes. I know a place, if I was going to leave, how do I get the hell out of here? I know how to go down a particular trail. I know where there's a bend in the river, something like that. That's all that is vital to police. And that you only get that information through the proper use of the press and helping them help you, achieve your goal.
Mike, people in the chat, someone in the chat wants to know, what is he, if he is convicted of this, and again, he's innocent until proven guilty, what is he eligible for sentence-wise?
Well, right now it's kidnapping 1. It's kidnapping 1. That's the highest level of kidnapping. That's kidnapping with a ransom. Okay, ransom demand. So he's looking at probably 25, minimum 25 to life in New York State. I don't know what it'd be in other states. He has some misdemeanor arrests that have been sealed. He had the one DWI back in 1999. But, so, you think, well, okay, it's the first big felony arrest. However, this is number 1. This is kidnapping 1. And because of that, it's probably going to be a 25-year to life sentence. Now, the only question is, would he be eligible for parole sometime in the future, in some sort of plea deal. But don't look for him to be, walking around your community anytime in the next couple of decades. But it's probably 25 to life.
Again, Mike, this case is it's not over. The investigation is continuing. There's search warrants still being executed. We don't know the results of the search warrants. We also don't know a great deal about Craig Ross Jr., about his background. It's been pretty quiet.
Mhm.
I doubt that DWI arrest he had in 1999 is his only arrest. I think that's what they released. It was the least, most innocuous arrest they could release. I fear that he has another background arrest in other areas, but they didn't need to release that yet. But if that is his only arrest, the DWI, which I doubt, that was the arrest that they were able to get the fingerprint match,
thankfully,
from the ransom note. And thank the Lord for that. I want to just play. John Miller was on CNN last night. I just want to play a little bit of this. I sort of like John Miller.
Fingerprints on a ransom note. I mean, a ransom note, how common is that in a child abduction case?
It is very old school. Child abduction cases, if the child is taken by strangers, is
But most child abductions are parental abductions.
The large majority are parental abductions, but when you take that out, you have 42% are taken by acquaintances. Now, that doesn't mean relatives necessarily. It could just be somebody the kid knew from the neighborhood and trusted as not a threat. Then you see another 40% that are taken by total strangers. And, when you look at those in the 9-year-old girl category, that's generally going to be a sexual predator. And the prospects there, 2 or 3 days in can be very bad. In this case, with the ransom note, you see a document that they got that could have been real, could have been a hoax, but they processed it. You put it into the AFIS system, which is the automated fingerprint information system that's going to scan it against every prisoner who's ever been arrested on a felony charge in New York State. And other databases. It comes up with a match of a name. As the governor explained, you can then say, okay, who is this person? Do we have a record of a cell phone? Was that cell phone pinging in Moreau State Park at the time of the abduction? Did that person or another person who's related to them buy a ticket? And then you get to that first location, second location, because you're looking at, okay, so where after that abduction did that cell phone ping? How many addresses? And, you're going to have to go get a warrant and search each one of those. And, under these exigent circumstances, you move very quickly. And it is a great thing that it worked out this well.
He explained it pretty well. Tiff Knox, is that standard operating procedure bill to give the most innocuous arrest? Tiff, I think in this case, if he does have a sexual offender background, they just don't want to release that right now. There's no need to. Yeah, he was identified through this DWI arrest, but I think, and I don't know for sure, but I'm thinking that's why they didn't want to release that. And I could be wrong, but that's my opinion on this. Guys, just again, we were elated when this case, when she was recovered yesterday and they had an arrest and that she's alive. And it's one of the most happy endings I've seen ever to one of these investigations. And again, we talk about spiking the football or celebrating, and we got to take a day to just celebrate this. Mike, your final thoughts.
Billy, as a father of 3, and I know you're a dad too, if I'm there working as an officer, I am supercharged, amped up, full of adrenaline. I don't care how many days this takes. I'm doing my job, and I'm not going home until I find that little girl. And this outcome is about the greatest thing. Some of these cops, this will probably be the greatest and most successful, abduction, kidnapping, missing child case that they've ever worked on. This is a fabulous thing because so many times none of these kind of cases do not end up well. And this case is fabulous. Everything just worked out perfectly. Everybody did their job perfectly, and we had a tremendous result. And kudos to the cops, and kudos for sticking to procedures and keeping their cool, keeping their calm, getting everybody together, FBI, state police, local police, the park police, everybody working in tandem together like a well-oiled machine. And we got a wonderful result. And, just keep our fingers crossed for that little girl and hope that she gets help she needs, and God bless that family.
Absolutely. Folks, Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great night and God bless.
One episode just ain't enough.